afternoon, everyone. Calling to order the Port Order Use Authority for Friday, June 9, 2017. If Director Brown would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Giffen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the board, closed session item 3A, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A. That's the Keep Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority in the Monterey County case, Monterey County Superior Court case number M114961. Item 3B is also conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A. That's the successor agency of the redevelopment agency of the County of Monterey versus the California Department of Finance. Case number, Sacramento Superior Court case number 342016-8000-2403. And finally, item 3C, Public Employment Government Code Section 54959.7B, the Executive Officer Evaluation.
Okay. Shall we go? Okay, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the board. The board met in closed session under items 3A, B, and C. Heard from counsel on each of those items as to A and B. Item 3A, the Keep Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority matter. We do have a final settlement that I need to report out. The essential terms of the settlement are that FORA will pay $255,000 to KFOW's counsel for attorney's fees. The county will pay that same amount. FORA and the county will comply with the terms of the writ that has been issued by the Superior Court of Monterey, and FORA and the county will not appeal the judgment. Other than that, there's nothing further to report on the remaining items of 3B or 3C.
Thank you. That's the announcements from, okay, well, we've got to have roll call.
Thank you. Supervisor Parker? Here. Supervisor Adams? Supervisor Phillips? Mayor Edelin, Councilmember O'Connell, Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Hoffa, Mayor Rubio,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander, Mayor Carbone, Mayor Gunter, Councilmember Garfield, Councilmember Reimers, Kathleen Lee.
Anthony Musa representing
Thank you.
Congressman Panetta instead of Kathleen.
Nicole Charles, Erica Parker, Debbie Hale, Brett McFadden, Donna Blitzer, Dr. Ochoa, Colonel Brown, Bill Collins, Vicky Nakamura, Michelle Overmeyer, Dr. Thomas Moore. Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. In terms of announcements, acknowledgements, and correspondence, we have a board workshop still seeking responses for availability of poll on July 26th, 9:30 a.m. or 1:30 p.m. So please respond so we know when to schedule that. And there's a detonation today at Fort Ord. You have some information on that? On Tuesday?
Stan would know that.
There be a detonation, is this on? There'll be a detonation this Tuesday between 12 and 9. It'll be force practice rounds that were found during the additional verification work we did in Seaside. They're practice 40 millimeters, they're plastic and non-ferrous metals. So we recovered them as part of our verification work, and they'll be detonated before the team demobilizes. Thank you.
I think it's important to point out that this is kind of what we anticipated we would find. This is a detonation of practice rounds. They're made of non-ferrous material. So when the Army goes in and does its work, which it does excellent work, in year 2000, you weren't looking for these specific items. You had multiple different approaches. So this is an area where we went back in to do our clean area. This is in Seaside, just to the east of General Jim Moore. These are non-metallic explosive devices, but they're practice rounds, so they take a relatively small charge. So the good news is our systems now find those kinds of things, and we wind up with a safer place.
Okay.
Yeah, so Chair, members of the board, I have a request that if the board members are willing, I'd ask for an emergency, that they add a resolution to today's agenda for a special acknowledgement. It's specifically Donna Blitzer, who is retiring from her career in the University of California, and for many, many moons has been an alternate or a member of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board. In fact, she was sitting and attending at the very first Fort Ord Reuse Authority meeting in 1994. And so I do have a resolution acknowledging the great work that she's done. I'd like to read a few of the whereases, if that would be appropriate.
Move that it be added to the agenda.
Second. There's a motion and a second.
Yes, Chair.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
And I'd just like to read just a few of these into the record. One, this is a resolution of the governing body of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, be it hereby resolved by the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors that, whereas Donna Blitzer has been an active Monterey Bay community member, engaged as an advocate for community improvement, educational advancement, and citizen services for 47 years. And whereas Ms. Blitzer served 18 years in the state and federal legislative arena as Congressman Sam Farr's chief of staff, including at the time Fort Ord was announced for closure when he was in the state assembly, and as a 17th Congressional District Director. Whereas Donna became the Director of Government and Community Relations at UC Santa Cruz in 2001, serving as an alternate to the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board since that appointment. And whereas Donna's value to the region is exemplified through her record of innovation in times of state and federal funding uncertainty, her advocacy for reaching out to the entire community, and her successes in building strong and lasting partnership. And whereas the inimitable Ms. Blitzer is known for her dynamic political acumen, full and frank descriptions of the ills of partisanship, behind-the-scenes team-building skills, and calling upon our Canadian ancestry and working to strengthen U.S. immigration policy. Now therefore be it resolved for all the reasons above that the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, the Board of Directors, extends its gracious appreciation and deepest gratitude to Donna Blitzer for her leadership and exemplary service to the Monterey region, and best wishes in retirement as she and her husband plan to spend more time with family, friends, traveling, and in their Santa Cruz art gallery.
Well, thank you very much. You've really put me on the spot here. As Michael said, I have been involved with FORA since before FORA was FORA. One of the things we worked on early on with Sam and Senator Henry Mello was the authorizing legislation to allow FORA to be an economic development agency. So I've sat in several different chairs, as Michael mentioned, the Assembly and the Congressional, and now UC Santa Cruz. And we all know there's been a lot of challenges and a lot of successes, but I think the one thing that's been constant over all these years is the dedication of the board and the staff to make things move forward, as well as the dedication of the members of the public who come to these meetings and participate and are engaged. So thank you very, very much. It's been a real honor to be involved in these issues and working with all of you.
Thank you. Are there any other acknowledgements, announcements, or correspondence?
No, sir.
Okay. Let's move on to the consent agenda, which consists of 7A, approve the May 12th board meeting minutes, administrative committee meeting, Veterans Issues Advisory Committee, Transition Task Force update, legislative support update, public correspondence to the board, executive officer travel report, transaction worksheet reporting, adoption of a resolution rescinding June 11 memorandum of understanding, approved contract term extensions for Denise Duffney Associates, Transportation of Agency of Monterey County reimbursement agreement, and the Michael Baker International Incorporated Professional Services Agreement. Michael?
Yes, Chair, there's a couple of items that I want to bring the board's attention to under the board meeting minutes. There is an adjusted set of minutes for the board members to review that are at their table. There was several sentences that were inadvertently left out of the minutes on what would be page 4 in your board packet. It has to do with item 8C, if I remember correctly, which has to do with the capital improvement program. The section documenting the motion by the board members regarding the item TAMC FORA fee reallocation study, those modifications, staff picked those up and have made that change. I think one or two of the board members picked it up as well. Is that right, Mr. O'Connell? Also, that's an action item. Most of these items are not action items, except to receive a report, but I want to note under Transition Task Force, these are not intended to be, or not minutes of the meetings. They're not approved by the Transition Task Force. The Transition Task Force is not a Brown Act committee. There are some concerns about some of the language, and we'll bring that up for the Transition Task Force next week. So do not take this as minutes or an action by this board approving them in any way. And then I think council has something on item 7I, and I do want to note that item 7J are several contract term extensions. I use the term term. This is not additional dollars. This is several pieces of work that have taken a little bit extra time to do. They do not affect our budgets in any way because we're not asking for additional dollars, and so the contracts have to be extended to accommodate the ongoing work.
Mr. Giffen?
Yes, as to item 7I, that item asks the board to adopt a resolution rescinding the June 2011 Memorandum of Understanding approval. We received, prior to the meeting today, approximately an hour before the meeting, a letter from Stamp Erickson Law Firm. Molly Erickson is objecting to one particular aspect of the resolution that has been proposed. That specific item on the resolution is number 3, which says that, to direct FORA staff to continue with the environmental review process for the East Side Parkway project. In general, I don't agree with the characterization that Ms. Erickson makes of this item, or even that the resolution, nor do I agree that it is in violation of the Brown Act. However, I think for purposes of today, we do need to pass this in order to comply with the settlement agreement, and I would recommend that the board go ahead and vote with the exclusion of number 3 from the resolution.
All right. Okay, is there any questions on the consent agenda from the board? Anybody want to pull an item? Anybody in the public? Any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, yes, sir. Yeah, you can make that in the motion for the consent agenda with the changes noted. So the motion and the second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
And Chair, staff will take that as acknowledgement of what comments we made, including the adjustments to minutes and item 7I.
Right. Okay, we'll move on to business items. Item 8A is approve a proposed 3% cost of living adjustment, second vote. I will entertain any comments specifically on the second vote from the board and any public comment on that same vein of only on the second vote. Any comments? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now it's on. Thanks. Thank you. In the cost of living adjustment, it said that the goal is to be just above the median, for contracts, just above the median for the local agencies. The cost of living increase seems to be calculated, this is on page 48, with information about surrounding municipalities' cost of living increases, and Pacific Grove had no cost of living increase this year. So if we're looking at wanting to be in sync with surrounding agencies, 3.0 would put the cost of living increase at FORA at the top of all the other municipalities that are comparables, just filling in information that is listed here as pending negotiations. Those negotiations are complete now in Pacific Grove.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be voting against this, as I believe I did last time, because I really don't believe that another increase in salaries is warranted without requesting that those employees who still do not pay their portion of PERS be asked to make that contribution. And I also want to say that there was a lot of confusion at the board meeting last month about the board's authority, so I appreciate that there is a memo in our board packet clarifying that there are no bargaining units, there are no employment contracts except for Michael's, and that every year we do set compensation, salaries and benefits during the budget hearing, so that is or was the appropriate time to do that. And I just want to say that I was very concerned that the board was either told or given the impression that those things might not be the case, and as well as a real misrepresentation of the goals of the PERS reform. So I just really appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity to say that I felt that the leadership from FORA really gave us a bum steer and really contributed to an undermining of the board's authority and the inability to really have a discussion on the issues at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any comments from the public? Okay, so do we have to restate the motion?
I make a motion, we approve that item for the 3% cost of living increase.
So the motion is second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
3 noes. Is that correct? 3 noes? 4. All right. So that passes. Okay, the Capital Improvement Program 2017 fee reallocation study, again, a second vote. I'll entertain any comments on the second vote from the board. Are there any comments? Any comments from the public? Okay, let's restate that motion.
Yes, Chair, the second vote, approve option B, fund local transportation projects first for use as an updated CIP transportation baseline in the 2017 FORA fee reallocation study, and accept the 2017 FORA fee reallocation study prepared by the Transportation Agency for Monterey County as noted in the board packet attachment A.
Your motion? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 1 no. Okay, moving on to item 8B2, the 2017 biennial fee review resolution.
This is a carryover from last month. We did a brief presentation last month, and Peter Said will provide a little more detail. Every 2 years, we do a community facilities district special tax and base-wide fee adjustment. What we call a fee is. Peter, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So last time we got together, we talked a little bit, rather the board talked and discussed a formulaic fee adjustment. That is a formulaic process that was brought before this board in August 29th, 2012, and it was discussed how would the CFD be set, and it was decided by the board to set it using a formulaic approach, given the specific inputs from various components of our budget. Since then, in 2012, there have been a number of different modifications to the CFD. That CFD happens every 2 years. That automatic formula adjustment happens every 2 years, or if there's a material change to the FORA capital improvements program. When we originally started this, there was a $44,000 CFD fee for residential per dwelling unit. It's now currently around $24,000 per dwelling unit. The process by which the formulaic fee study works is first you identify what the total remaining costs are. So we look at all the capital improvement program, figure out what it needs to take until we finish the capital improvement program. And then we determine what the different sources of monies are that are not CFD based. So land sales, grants, that sort of thing. We figure out how much is going into that. We subtract the two and we come up with the net costs for the remaining amount that tells us how much CFD we need. We then compare that amount in step 4 to what we project the CFD to be collected, and that presents us with a percentage change. And step 5 is what we're doing here today, and that is deciding to adjust the policy and special tax as necessary. So what I did is I put together a presentation or a little, I got that way up behind myself, little animation to help better understand what's happening with this calculation. First, as we determine the cost to complete, in this case, it is about $265 million to finish the different obligations, the CEQA obligations. Of that, $7 million is building removal, and the remaining is $258 million of capital improvement projects. We then look at step 2, which is to determine how much monies we're getting from elsewhere. So here it's land sale and property tax and fund balances equal about $112,000. The specific numbers are in the report. And then the net cost, that remaining, is the $145,000. That's the step 3. We take basically all the dark green away from the light green, and that's what's left. And then we take that net costs and we put it in relationship to the estimated revenues that we'd receive from the different dwelling unit CFD taxes that we do. And that particular percentage gives us the amount of change that's recommended by the formulaic fee review. And here, the recommendation by this particular study, the equation spits out 8% increase in the CFD. So then we look at some key assumptions when we put this complicated menagerie together. Forgive me for making it sound negative, it's not. We look at the jurisdictional forecasts, those fluctuate yearly. We look at the amount of development that they're projecting and the amount of land sales that they're projecting. We take into account the construction cost index, which is 3.9% this year. That's from January to January, and we apply that to the forecasted CIP costs. Another assumption is that we take building removal administration and we stop that at the obligation completion in 2020. Another assumption is that property tax collection is done in arrears. And the fifth assumption that's kind of key too is that the caretaker costs, which are drawn out of the property tax collection, are also spent in arrears. So those are the five major assumptions that have caused us to kind of make minor changes. The recommendation then is that we have a 0.8% change in the CFD. So you'll see here in 2016 the CFD was $23,655, and we're proposing that it increases $182, and then you see the remaining numbers in your in the list there. So the recommendation from staff is to approve the resolution to implement a community facilities district special tax and base-wide development fee adjustment. There may be a question about the delta or difference between the 3.9% construction cost index and the recommended 0.8% increase. And it's simply that this particular allocation, or forgive me, this particular calculation spits out 0.8%, and it's due to the formulaic approach. So we did put a little note in there that the CFD automatically indexes by the CCI, which is 3.9% this year, on July 1st, if the board takes no action on this particular item. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Peter?
All right, in which case I would leave you with the resolution.
Okay, are there any questions from the public?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jan Schreiner. I'm speaking as a resident of Marina, but I'm also sitting on the board of the Marina Coast Water District. And I just realized, a similar kind of thing came before the Water District Board. This Community Facilities District, I want to be clear on, the one that came before the Marina Coast Board was actually the Board of Supervisors, Monterey County Board of Supervisors. Are they the same for this Community Facilities District? It appeared to me in that packet that it was created simply so that the developer did not have to pay the CFD or the CFD difference, but was actually able to tax future residents in order to collect that. So could you clarify who the Community Facilities District is in this case, and is that the same purpose, to collect from the future residents rather than collect from the developers? Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, Mark?
Yes, Chair, if you asked me to answer that question, this is totally developer-driven. The Community Facilities District is by development, by building permit, so it's paid at building permit. And this was adopted by the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, I think, 15 years ago, Steve, and has been an ongoing Community Facilities District for that full period of time.
Okay, bring it up. Yes.
I can help clarify. So each of the developments on Fort Ord can adopt CFDs, Community Facilities Districts, on top of FORAs. So East Garrison, I believe, has one. Dunes on Monterey Bay has one. So it's a different district than the base-wide FORA Community Facilities District. It's just within the footprint of that particular development.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments? Yes, sir.
A question for our executive director. Are you confident that this fee, which is lower than what it might be if we didn't take this action? Are you confident that this reduced fee will take care of all of the necessary public amenities and infrastructure for each of the affected projects?
This is a part of a study that's done with our professional consultants, economic and planning systems. And this formulaic fee calculation assumes that all the expenses on one side are paid for by all the resources on the other side. We know from now through June 30, 2020, that we can make those things happen. What happens after June 30, 2020, what jurisdictional fees are adopted, what MCWD or TAMC actions are taken, or if there's an extension is still unknown. But from now through June 30, 2020, we are confident that we will be securing the fees, the costs that will be required to meet our mitigation.
Any other questions or comments? What are the wishes of the board?
Make a motion, we approve it.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
No second vote.
Did you raise your hand over there? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Item 8C, endorse MCWD as Groundwater Sustainability Agency. Donovan?
Chair Rubio, members of the board, just want to give a background on this item and queue it up for board discussion. So the background here is the the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which the California legislature adopted in 2014. So it set up a new set of rules for managing groundwater in the state. Also in 2015, there was a collaborative working group established, and they have met and established the governance of the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. So there's now a GSA over much of the Salinas Valley groundwater basin. And so that's kind of just context for what some recent steps on this next slide. So Marina Coast Water District, which is the purveyor for the Fort Ord service area, they have submitted a notice of intent to be the Groundwater Sustainability Agency for the former Fort Ord, along with the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin GSA. So there's an overlapping applications to be the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, which is important in the state act because whoever is the Groundwater Sustainability Agency will be charged with making a sustainability plan for the basin or for the sub-basin. So in terms of what the state law says, if there's an overlap after June 30, 2017, the state will step in or may step in, and they are able to recover their fees for intervening and managing the disputed area. And this is just a map. It's based off of the state's website. You can go in there and see which areas have overlapping disputes, which areas don't. And you see here just the blue highlighted outline of the former Fort Ord. So that's where, within that area, the former Fort Ord wells are. So there's actually, the green shows an exclusive GSA. So the green on the screen is actually the Marina Coast Water District Marina Service Area, which is not disputed. That's been confirmed by the state, but then just south of that is the disputed area. And so FORA received a request from Marina Coast Water District to endorse them as the GSA. So FORA staff brought that to the Administrative Committee, and they recommended staff provide a endorsement letter for consideration by the Executive Committee and the Board. So that's the background of why we're here today. And on that analysis, the basis for each of their applications, Marina Coast Water District, through the facilities agreement with FORA from 1998, provides the service to this area. So that's their basis for an application. The Salinas Valley Basin GSA is eligible as a Monterey County GSA, so that's their basis. And on the governance of each of those entities, MCWD has a 5-member board elected from the Marina service area, so it does not have an elected member from former Fort Ord. And the Salinas Valley GSA has an 11-member board, and it's from within the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin. And then another analysis point is FORA has a legislative transition in 2020. So that brings into question if FORA's agreement with MCWD goes away, how does that leave a GSA? And that's part of this dispute. Since that dispute was recognized, the State Water Resources Control Board submitted a letter. Their letter states that MCWD lacks authority to undertake groundwater management in Fort Ord. Their letter also notes that it is a non-binding advisory opinion letter. So Marina Coast Water District Legal Counsel has responded to that letter. They've stated that this letter from the State Water Resource Control Board is an unenforceable underground regulation. So there's some California law about ability of one agency to state that there's a regulation without actual codifying in state code. So that's their response. And then also that the Department of Water Resources and not the State Water Resources Control Board determines GSA eligibility. So that's how Marina Coast has responded to that. And just wanted to also present the board with an alternative to consider. Should the board want to consider this, staff has put together a number of proposed principles that would advise any GSA that's chosen in the future. It may be mooted if the state makes a decision, but FORA has certain principles that we may want to communicate to either GSA. And so what's included in the packet is each of these principles detailed in a little more verbiage, but the three principles are essentially implement the 1997 Fort Ord Reuse Plan. So the reuse plan indicates that FORA is going to need 9,000 acre-feet of water. 6,600 comes from the groundwater basin. 2,400 acre-feet comes from an augmented source. So that would be a principle to communicate. Another principle would be to implement equitable allocation of water. So FORA has, with its agreement from the Army, when we received groundwater resource from the Army to allocate to the jurisdictions, that the landowners receive an equitable share. So that FORA wouldn't be treated any different than anyone else in the groundwater basin, our 6,600 acre-feet. And then finally, a third principle would be to manage the groundwater resources with an enduring local agency. So since FORA does have a legislative transition of 2020, we would want an entity that could manage the groundwater long-term. So that's essentially the breakout of that recommendation. So as the staff report indicates, there's three recommendations. The first two are related to Marina Coast Water District's request that FORA endorse them as a GSA. So the first recommendation would be the board consider that request, and if that's in the positive, that the board consider authorizing the executive officer to write a letter communicating that. And then another alternative was just as presented, that the board could consider endorsing a statement of principles that would be communicated to either GSA should they be elected or chosen. So any questions from the board?
And before the questions start, during the last board meeting, the board asked me to take a look into the legality of whether the board could even consider an endorsement request. I did take a look. There's nothing that specifically precludes the board from endorsing this action, but there may be political or other considerations that the board may or may not find palatable.
Thank you. I think there's a option that's been left out, and that is to do nothing. Okay, so that's an option, right? Director Moore.
Chair Rubio, I do have a few slides that might add some clarification to the issue, if you would indulge me.
Well, let me ask this question first. Did the county bring any slides to present their position? Okay, well, I think we'll stick with our staff report. Thank you. I think if you're going to bring slides from your position, then Monterey County should have the same opportunity to present their case. to be fair.
Well, I'm not sure the dispute is with Monterey County. I think the dispute currently is with the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency.
Are they here?
Yes.
Do you have
It's
any
me.
slides?
No slides.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What force would an endorsement by this board have? Who does it go to? Who makes the decision?
Goes to the state.
Okay. All right.
Questions?
I'll wait for comment.
Yes, Mr. Hopper.
So the GSA status, does that mean that whichever entity has this GSA status for the Fort Ord would become the de facto water purveyor going forward for all development on Fort Ord? Or what exactly is the relationship between the GSA status and who actually provides water to future development in the former Fort Ord?
So a GSA is different than a water purveyor. So a GSA develops the groundwater sustainability plan, which will set levels of pumping of the groundwater resource. So the actual purveyor would be, if in the case of a cutback, would be directed to cut back by a certain number of acre feet that they're pumping.
If I could follow up, so then if one agency had that ability to direct the water purveyor to pump less water, for example, then that could affect the prices or even the ability of development at FORA to be sustained or to have water. Is that correct? That, let's say if the GSA said, no, you can't pump water above this rate, could that affect future development on Fort Ord or prices for consumers on Fort Ord?
Likely both scenarios. So it might change the rate structure for customers. It might prevent others from having future development since the pumping has been limited.
Okay, Mayor Gunther and then Tom Moore, and then Dennis.
So everyone knows, we have, at the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, have sent a letter to the Department of Water Resources asking them for a definitive clarification as to how this is laid out. And we will expect that letter was mailed overnighted, and they should have received it today. And we will be looking for a response from the state. Our feeling is that we represent the entire valley and part of Marina, and that to Director Hoffa's comment, I've never heard of anyone say that we are in the position of controlling growth at Fort Ord, taking water away from anybody. But if we don't do this as an agency and the state decides to take it over, it'll infect the entire basin of Monterey County, Fort Ord, and everyone else, and I'm sure there will be some ramifications that we do not expect. My understanding is that we are currently in some kind of a process with negotiations. We have a professional negotiator working with Marina Coast Water District, as well as they'll be meeting with Greenfield and Clark County and San Ardo in the south.
Mr. Moore.
So Marina Coast Water District staff has in fact been active with staff from the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency to try and resolve this issue. One of the facts that exists is that since Marina Coast has been declared within its political boundaries to be the exclusive groundwater sustainability agency within the Monterey subbasin, over its political boundary portion of the Monterey subbasin, what that means is that SGMA requires either Marina Coast and Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency to collectively come up with a plan to sustain the Monterey Basin, or the two agencies to make separate coordinated plans based on the same set of input data about the hydrology of the basin. So Marina Coast is intending to cooperate with the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency because the law says we must.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor. Based on the presentation, it just seems like, without having a legal background, it seems like there could be a lot of doors left later reopened with the possible ramifications. And thought, unless I misunderstood, legal counsel has just said that an endorsement may not carry that much weight anyways. Am I wrong or right?
I said there was nothing that precluded this board from endorsing the letter.
Okay. Well, the former disputes between the two agencies, are there any, by this endorsement, are there anything, any legal doors that could be reopened later on that missing here?
I don't think that the previous disputes are relevant.
Any other questions from the board? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have the history on this, but from what I've heard, a question that keeps arising is this really FORA's business? And if it is, could somebody tell me why? And if it's not, could somebody tell me why?
Well, I think it's our business because someone brought it to us.
Okay.
And we can
Well,
decide
good point. Thank you.
as a board whether we want to take it on as our business or not. Is that right?
It's a very complicated answer to that question that I won't get into, but I would say this. Every member of the board has expressed its concern about the reliability of water resources at the former Fort Ord. The water resources were negotiated between the United States Army and the Monterey County Water Resources Agency years ago. Those rights have been conveyed to Marina Coast Water District. Portions of them, that is, through the United States Army and their conveyance mechanism. So it is the Fort Ord Reuse Authority's concern to the extent that something that happens in any of the sub-basin affects future development on Fort Ord and the delivery of those services, because at least for the 3 years and 2 weeks that the Fort Ord Reuse Authority is legislatively to continue, there are issues about that groundwater. So for those reasons, the administrative committee said this is pertinent, and but it didn't suggest that it was crucial or critical, that it was one or the other, just that a weighing in is important. So that's where they left it, and I think staff would agree. Understanding and being clear about what the impact could be on the future of Fort Ord is crucial.
Yes, sir.
Does the groundwater system that we're a part of, does it have some logical physical boundaries? Is there some sort of coherent unit, that is clear, more or less discrete, that would define boundaries, just like, that could be compared to the Monterey, the agency's
Well,
boundaries?
I think it's described as Zone 2C in the Salinas water basin. And the Monterey sub-basin extends out through Fort Ord, past Highway 68, and approaches the Toro Park area and some other areas out there. It's more of it's a sub-basin.
So the states, I was just looking up the website for the DWR, and it says that it can be one agency or it can be a combination of agencies. It can be joint powers. Did staff consider that issue of whether it would make sense to have a match between the physical boundaries of the groundwater system and the agency or agencies that would manage it or develop a plan?
I don't know if staff has done that.
I would just comment, in the process of establishing the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin GSA, Marina Coast was at the table as part of the initial discussions, and did not participate in the final conclusion of the JPA, so they stepped away from the process.
Yes, sir.
So, just want to be a little bit clear, Marina Coast didn't fully, it's correct that Marina Coast did not become part of the JPA that formed the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. However, Marina Coast is still on the advisory committee to that agency. So we haven't stepped away from the process. We just wanted to make sure that we were representing your interests as a co-equal partner with others.
Okay, I'm going to...
Before you go to the public, I think there needs to be a little clarity because the impression's given that the Salinas Valley groundwater sustainability has any effect on City of Monterey, Carmel, Pacific Grove. That has got a water master, is my understanding, and they are in a separate time zone of the water agencies in the state of California. So, in reality, people in those areas are not affected by what we're doing with the Groundwater Sustainability Agency.
Yes, Ms. Reimer.
I'm new to this or new here. Regardless, the agencies involved in the GSA formation dispute need to reach an agreement to allow the prompt GSA designation. Otherwise, the state water resource will intervene by June 30th, of 2017. So there's not much time. So we're talking weeks. So can't there some conclusion for this be made? I mean, it's coming up quick, or else the state's going to step in.
Well, that would be the two agencies involved in the dispute. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I appreciate the statement of principles. This is a very complicated situation with the two agencies working together to resolve to become which one's going to serve the area. And I appreciate that staff or that the council has provided us with the statement of principles and would support that direction.
Yes, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the state of California, there's 515 groundwater basins, 127 of which are covered by the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And it is correct that there's a June 30th deadline in the law for agencies to figure this out. My understanding from our staff's discussion with the State Water Resources Control Board staff is that there are quite a few overlapped areas, dozens throughout those 127 basins and subbasins in the state of California. So while technically the deadline is June 30th to get this resolved, the staff at the State Water Resources Control Board has indicated they're not really chomping at the bit to just jump right smack into the middle of our dispute on July 1st. So we're trying to work this out, and I hope we can get it worked out by June 30th. But I wouldn't want to fall on my sword about if we took until July 10th to fix it or July 15th.
Right. I'm going to go ahead and move this over to the public. Are there public comments?
Afternoon, Chair Rubio, members of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, Anthony Lombardo. Unfortunately, we have to view everything Marina Coast does through the lens of its litigation strategy against the Monterey Peninsula. I'm heading into the 9th court proceeding where Marina Coast is attempting to stop the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project at the end of July. Why that is relevant today, this happens to be my trial brief I'm working on to file on Monday, is one of the allegations Marina Coast has made is that the project that CalAM and the Coastal Commission have approved violates the Sustainable Groundwater Management Agency Act. And so giving Marina Coast Water District any additional authority in this basin is giving them only far greater platform from which to attack the water supply project for the Monterey Peninsula. I'm happy to report that their 8 previous attempts have all failed, but there's no reason to give them any more ammunition than we need to. In answer to a couple of Director's questions, Director Hoffa asked if this agency that controls the Salinas Valley Basin would have control over Fort Ord. In fact, it has control over every jurisdiction in the basin. So in other words, if there's a water shortage, it can tell the Castroville Community Services District what it has to do. It can tell Cal Water Service and the City of Salinas what it has to do, the City of King, the City of Soledad, the City of Greenfield, the City of Gonzales, and even Chular. And so the control that this agency will have is not peculiar to Fort Ord or not Fort Ord. It's over everything. In Dr. Ochoa's question, to answer the basin runs from San Ardo at the very southern tip of Monterey County to the outlet of the Salinas River. So it's unfortunate that Marina Coast refused to join the Joint Powers Agency that formed the rest of the basin, but that's the position we find ourselves in, and so I would respectfully request that you certainly do not send a letter to the state after the state has said Marina Coast request is illegal, because it does not comply with state law to be the groundwater agency for an area outside of its jurisdiction. The government code sections, well, it's clearly stated there, they don't have the authority to regulate outside the boundary of their agency. And if you look at that blue map, they're actually asking for the authority to regulate out as far almost to Mount Toro. So it's not only is it outside their boundary, it's outside of reason too. So frankly, I like Mayor Rubio's suggestion is probably do nothing, but I don't think the state, if you wished it, that Mayor Gunter, who's the president of the organization, you don't think he's aware of the principles of the former forward reuse, you can certainly send him that letter. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I'm getting there. Mayor Rubio, board members, Tom Mancini. I've been listening to this. I've been following this along, and as you know, right now there's over 7,000, almost 8,000 different type of connections out there in the former photo that the Marina Coast Water District provides to. That's not including businesses. Those are mostly all residential. Basically, if my figures are right, that's approximately 2 times the number of the city of Marina. I think Marina's got about 4,000 connections. I might be right. I might be off a couple of hundred. But you've got double the number of people on the former photo not represented, period. So the best thing to do until these people can get their heads together and interact together is do nothing. And you have 3 or 4 cities here that have no impact on this decision whatsoever. So my recommendation is that you let the attorneys bang it out and see what happens, and do nothing at this time. Because remember, if you do give it to them, they have to figure out how to get representation on the 2,000, 7,000, or 8,000 customers on the former Fort Ord. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jan Schreiner, representing as a resident of the Marina. I want to thank FORA for the consideration and Marina City Council Member O'Connell for advocating for the community of Marina. I want to ask the legal expert on the representation of Gunter as the president of SVGSA, the reason for not recusing. And I'd like all of you to remember, when you sit at FORA, you represent the Ord community. We are counting on you to represent the Ord community. That is what the contract was about. And I've come to this understanding from talking with the legals. Why are so many counter interests supposedly representing the Ord community sitting here and voting against the Ord community's interests? So please recall that when you are a FORA member, that is your mission here, is to represent the Ord community and the restructure and the rebuilding of what was once a base, rather than representing Pacific Grove, rather than representing Monterey. When you're in this room, you are representing the Ord community, and we are counting on that as a broad community. There are different interpretations of the letter of the law, and there are ways that these can be addressed through negotiation and written agreements. If Marina Coast had been allowed to present their slides, I think some of you would have a clearer understanding of that. The representation that I saw from participating in 15 of the collaborative working group meetings, 2 of the advisory committee meetings, and 2 of the GSA governing board meetings, is that there is no one representing the Ord community in any of those groups. The only one who is in those meetings that is here is Gunter. So that is the Ord community's representation with the Salinas Valley Groundwater currently in that governing board and advisory committee. In one of the last meetings, there were some concerns about the ag wells in the Marina Coast Service area, which really surprised me, because as being part of the Marina Coast Water District, I should know if there are ag wells. And so some of the concerns are a little bit unclear or perhaps confused. And along those lines, as far as the service areas mentioned so far, Clark Colony and Greenfield are also having the same overlap, right? We all know the adjudicated basin is not part of Sigma. We all know that federal lands are also exempt, correct? And that the 18400, which has that so confusing of a name, is, would like to clarify with Director Moore that it is considered a part of the Marine Coast Water District GSA area. So that has already been resolved, regardless of how some people interpret the law.
Thank you, Ms. Schreiner.
Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I didn't see the yellow light, but I do have one more comment. I can't see the lights from
Your
this
time is up,
angle.
ma'am.
Time is up.
Thank you for giving me such a generous amount of time.
Same as everybody else, 3 minutes.
Good
Yes, ma'am.
afternoon. My name is Paula Pillow, and some of you already know me. I've represented a portion of the ORD community for many, many years. And as part of that representation, I have, in fact, as some of you know, found myself oftentimes at odds with Marina Coast Water District relative to its rate increases and the lack of annexation of the ORD community. However, should Marina Coast Water District not become the exclusive GSA for its current ORD community service area, and this continues as a dispute beyond the June 30th date, our community will receive from the JPA additional fees and charges layered on top of other increases, and these fees will not be subject to a Proposition 218 process. And if there were one, the ORD community residents could at least participate in that. Those fees and charges and increase would instead be ordained by the JPA that will be seating representatives from the Ag community, Cal Water, and Cal Am, but on which the ORD community has absolutely no representation whatsoever. As I've said, I have at times been at odds with Marina Coast Water District, but they have undertaken sustainability measures already, restricting in some instances pumping, while at the same time they have initiated the annexation process for the ORD service area, for which they are the sole water purveyor, owning all of the wells and all of the infrastructure. There is no good reason, and I emphasize good reason, to not support Marina Coast Water District from becoming the GSA, the exclusive GSA for the ORD community, and I therefore strongly urge you to convey your endorsement of Marina Coast Water District to become the exclusive GSA for the ORD community to the appropriate agencies. Thank you.
Public comment?
Hello, FORA Board. Thanks for all you do. My name is Therese Kohler, and I live in East Garrison. Part of the ORD community is receiving water from Marina Coast Water District. We have had a long and positive history with MCWD, sanctioned by FORA. We hope to see an annexation into Marina Coast Water District's service area in the near future, and it is my understanding that this is in process. We cannot be silent about potentially being jockeyed from our long-standing relationship with MCWD to have an unknown entity, the newly formed Salinas Valley Basin GSA, now have a right to determine allocation of water for us and potentially impact the cost of water to homeowners. FORA needs to stand by its mission and keep us with MCWD. Those of you who do not feel this impact directly must understand that those who have served us by MCWD have the right to stay with MCWD. Do not take that away from us. It is a truly significant issue for us. Please do not just write a letter to the state, but actively advocate for us to remain with MCWD. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Biala, and I'm a resident of Marina. It is with alarming disbelief that I observe this current issue evolving as to whether or not MCWD should be the GSA over the ORD community that will allow them to continue to manage the water supply and charge fees that they have done for decades. I say continue as this is the key word. How is it that MCWD has been given the authority by FORA to not only provide the water, because they are water purveyors and own the pipes and infrastructure to deliver actual water, but they also have been successfully managing and deciding fee structures and producing the lowest rates in the region? Now, with what appears to be political maneuvering of the worst kind, a JPA unknown to the ORD community wants to do what? I hope you understand how utterly incomprehensible this move is. Please do not allow a newly created entity with a significant majority of special interest representation to be able to impose regulations over the ORD communities by bypassing MCWD with its long history in that community and its undeniably responsible actions for developing long-term sustainable groundwater. This includes, by the way, a substantial financial investment in an airborne electromagnetic ERT imaging of the groundwater basin and the pure water recycling project. I cannot tell you how disturbing this issue is to me. Do not fall into the trap of championing special interest over the provision of water for people. Please vote for this clearly right decision to support the full responsibilities of MCWD over the ORD communities. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, board members. Happy to see you. Glad to be here. I'm a longtime resident of Marina. My name is Margaret Ann Coppernall. I wholly support a FORA endorsement of the Marina Coast Water District to become the exclusive GSA for the ORD communities, which we fondly refer to in Marina as historic Fort Ord. Marina Coast Water District is the envy of the entire Monterey Peninsula because it has a decades-long golden track record for providing fresh, potable water to its service areas at affordable prices and with impeccable management expertise of our precious water supply resources. Marina Coast Water District has heavily invested in groundwater sustainability programs and plans with great success. For example, the perched dune sand aquifer has seen its fresh water restored through reduced pumping and water conservation efforts, which produced impressive results. I wasn't going to bring this up today, but since a previous speaker did, I feel compelled to let you know that the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project, which was stated in its DEIR originally, was going to intake ocean water from underneath the surface. But instead, it has gone into marinas, dunes, sand aquifer, and extracting water also from the 180-foot aquifer, and blowing this water back into the bay at 2,100 gallons per minute. So our freshwater supply in Marina is dwindling, and the seawater intrusion is coming back. So that is one reason that we don't appreciate that invasion of our water supply. It's our only one. You could not make a more sound, more wise decision today than to support and endorse Marina Coast Water District's request to be the exclusive GSA for the Fort Ord area, historic area. Marina Coast Water is a jewel and one of the city of Marinas and the Ord community's most treasured and beloved assets. It works collaboratively and in cooperation with other agencies as a good neighbor because it wants everybody to succeed. It believes that everybody has a human right, a basic human right, even the United Nations says so, to have fresh water at affordable prices. So that's why Marina Coast Water District will be the best neighbor, because it believes in supporting everybody and helping everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Any other public comment?
Hi, my name's Michael Baer. I live on the Monterey Peninsula. The way I see it, I mean, I've looked somewhat into this, not to all the great detail that most of you have, but The way I see it, it's a matter of simple justice. Marina Coast has the right to manage the water system of Fort Ord community. Marina Coast does one thing only: water. I sat at the county supervisors meeting when they selected the board, this other SGA group, and there's not a lot of water experts on that board. There's a lot of other interest groups on that board. We're talking about groundwater, which is the water of California for the 21st century. And given the track record of Marina Coast providing the cheapest and best water on the peninsula, at least in the western part of Monterey County, and the fact that they have the rights and they are the service provider for the Fort Ord communities, I encourage you all to support, to send a letter of support. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Hi, I'm Lisa Berkeley, and I'm a Marina resident of just over 2 years. And
I'm Audra Walton. I'm a resident of Marina when my parents gave birth to me 42 years, almost 42 years ago. They brought me home to 3057 Sunrise here in Marina. I live in Preston Park currently, which is part of this Ord community that is, I think, what we're discussing this afternoon.
And actually, I'm speaking on behalf of us both at the moment. So many citizens contributed to the Fort Ord Base reuse plan. From the beginning, MCDW has been the agency responsible for providing water to support this plan and future growth of the Ord lands. MCWD is named in the base plan document as a partner to this growth. Now there's a hastily formed agency that argues that MCWD cannot be the GSA for the Ord lands. I don't really understand the opaque politics here, but how can a rashly created agency outside of its jurisdiction, lacking water infrastructure, legacy, and no water service rights become the preferred water agency of the Ord lands? Why do we need another layer of management regarding water? The Ord lands are unique and noteworthy and should not be lumped into a one-size-fits-all groundwater management plan. This could be slow development to a crawl, and it would not be in keeping with the Fort Ord reuse plan's guidelines that FORA has been charged with administrating before it closes down. I'm here to state the obvious, which is MCWD is the agency that has the history, jurisdiction, infrastructure, knowledge, vision, and rights to administer the water for the Ord lands. This is the agency that FORA should support as the GSA moving into the future. Thank you for your time and have a great weekend.
Any other public comment?
Hi, George Riley. I'm sorry there are two options here. There should be only one, it seems to me. And the structure of FORA and trying to apply an organized approach to all the resources here and a plan to consolidate the direction going forward, seems to me it's a no-brainer to try to maintain that consistency with the GSA designation. Why would you want to divide the responsibility for a self-contained community that already exists with at least a water service, and this is what we're talking about, and sewer service? Why would you want to divide that up? Why would you want to do that? Unless it's politics. But good planning, good resource management, good focus, and good priority scheme suggests and almost demands that this body keep the responsibilities integrated in a structure that already exists. And I would just hope you can see your way of doing that, because if you go in another direction, it's all politics. If you go in this direction, it's all mechanics, it's all performance, it's all service, it's all consistent with existing responsibilities. Existing responsibilities. Why would you want to break that up? I just hope you can go with the staff report. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Doug Yount, Marina Community Partners, Shay Holmes, one of the developers on former Fort Ord, who, yes, does use water. Regardless of who the GSA is, it's important that these groundwater resources for Fort Ord be protected for development. So it's important that it's recognized. There's some key principles, whether you adopt those or whatever, is that those principles are important for the protection of groundwater resources for the redevelopment of Fort Ord. You may want to consider also, if you do go forward with principles, or just to keep this in mind, that there's another activity coming up in the future, not too distant, which is another BRAC round. And protecting the water resources and the groundwater resources in this area relative to the Army, relative to the defense mission is very important. And it's important that, again, whomever may be the GSA, that it protect those resources for the defense missions that are here. And finally, this is an opportunity in this discussion to really, as a FORA board, strongly encourage MCWD to move forward with annexation and through the LAFCO process and move forward with the annexation. Sometimes through challenged political relationships come opportunities. And one of these opportunities may be to recognize the importance of the annexation. And speaking for our development, particularly, we have residents that are not represented by any water district, specifically. And it would be helpful and nice to have those folks have an opportunity to vote for a board for their water district. And so I encourage you to move forward with a water district, encourage them to annex as soon as they can. Thank you.
Any more public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. I'd just like to say that no matter what we do here today, it's not going to change the relationship that Marina Coast Water has in providing water for the Ord community. They're under contract until 2020. What happens after that, we don't know. They will probably have to enter into specific agreements with each community in the Ord community. We've heard a lot of things about how responsive Marina Coast Water is, and I hear a lot of different things from my chair in Seaside, from some of the customers of Monterey, Marina Coast Water, and they're not all very glowing because they require representation and they feel the lack, and they're not entirely happy with what's going on now. So I just wanted to make that known. Let's go ahead and get comments here. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. This is basically a legal dispute, and I'd like to echo what our chair said earlier. We shouldn't be getting involved in this. We should do nothing. On one hand, we have the Marina Coast Water District. We work with them. I know a lot of the members of the board. I like them personally. We're going to be working together to provide water before the next 3 years to the 5 land use jurisdictions of Monterey Peninsula. We'll continue to work together hand in glove on that. The problem is Marina Coast Water District is not consistent in their support as being a viable community partner. As Mr. Tony Lombardo, Esquire, said earlier, there have been 6 lawsuits trying to shut down the slant well for the CalAm project. In fact, there's another lawsuit going to trial in Santa Cruz County Superior Court on July 24th. If that lawsuit is successful, that test well shuts down, that kills the desalinization project. We don't make the cease and desist order. We lose 60% of our water in the Monterey Peninsula. That has a lot to do with the trust. The other thing, as you saw the map that we showed earlier, this is not just a dispute over the boundaries with regard to the 5 land use jurisdictions of the old FORA. Marina Coast Water District is trying to annex not only that, but a large chunk of county territory all the way out to Mount Toro. So it's not as simple as do we just have FORA or no FORA. It's a huge chunk of territory. That's Marina Coast Water District. On the other hand, you have the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. I went to the first meeting here a couple of years ago, almost immediately after California passed the legislation requiring these GSAs to come together. I was at the first meeting, and also there was Mayor Joe Gunter of Salinas. He and a bunch of other interested individuals got together and they worked their butts off to get this thing going against all odds. Nobody thought it would be able to be done, but he was able to do that. On the other, also Mayor Gunter, of all the elected officials I've seen over the last 20 years or so, he's done more to break down the lettuce curtain that exists between the Salinas Valley and the Monterey Peninsula. Instead of fighting and trying to keep water from us, he's trying to actively get water to us through pure water and some other ideas. So we have one organization that's actively trying to destroy the water in the Monterey Peninsula. We have another organization that is trying to actually help us and provide more water to the Monterey Peninsula. With me, it's a matter of trust, and I think of those two individuals. If I'm betting the future of Del Rio Oaks on, I think I'd rather go with the Salinas Valley. But in spite of that, we have two honorable organizations. It's a legal battle. I don't think we should get involved with this. So I'd like to make a motion that we basically do nothing.
Is there a second?
A second with some comments. I have the same concerns that were just expressed, and they're proposing to go well beyond the boundaries, not even of Fort Ord. And looking at the legal aspect of it, I think going that far beyond their jurisdictional boundary, it's a real question whether they have the authority for the GSA. And, they've worked hard on putting together a GSA that's going to take care of the whole basin. And the Fort Ord property is connected with that, too. Some of our wells are down right near the river in Zone 2C. And just because someone's the GSA doesn't mean Marina loses their right to be a water purveyor. So I second the idea of doing nothing.
You have the comments on second? No, I did have a question before. I would like to make a substitute motion. The question was, Ms. Schreiner did ask about recusing a board member, Gunter. Can we get a legal as to whether or not he would have to recuse himself sitting on this board?
I don't think there's anything that would preclude him from voting. I think we recognize that FORA is a regional body, and each one of you have your own constituencies, and I'm not aware of really any disabling conflict that would preclude him from voting on this issue.
Thank you. I just bring it up because she asked the question. I just wanted to make sure it answered. I would like to make a substitute motion, if I may, to accept the Marina Coast Water District endorsement request to be the Groundwater Sustainability Agency for the former Fort Ord, and authorize the Executive Officer to transmit a letter endorsing the MCWD as the GSA for the former Fort Ord.
Second.
There was a motion and a second. And I would request a roll call on that, if I may. Thank you. On the second.
Thank you. Just because this is FORA, I think it might be interesting to consider yet a third option. And I don't know if I'll get a second, but I will propose that that FORA write the letter supporting Marina Coast Water District as the GSA, also send the letter of principles to the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And here's my reasoning. We don't know how this is going to be resolved. We don't know when it's going to be resolved. It's really not up to us. But I think there's real value for FORA in having Marina Coast be our groundwater sustainability agency. We have, not only do we have direct access to them, we also have oversight over their budget and over projects proposed on the former Fort Ord. So it may be that the Department of Water Resources decides that one or the other is going to be the GSA. Another option that they are considering is to sort of let the overlapping jurisdictional questions ride and just ensure that the plans are consistent. And in that case, we would be able to have that direct input into the Marina Coast Water District. And also, by the time the plans are required to be established, that's around the 2020 timeframe. So when FORA sunsets in 2020, we will have been able to have the direct access to Marina Coast. If they are the GSA, also we would have direct access to inputting
the views of the Ord community into that plan that they are developing, which then they would have to coordinate with the Salinas Valley Basin. Or if the Salinas Valley Basin GSA becomes the one GSA or has to make their plan mesh, we would have established those principles, and of course we could communicate with them as well. But I think it's worth keeping in mind that this isn't, it may be an either-or situation, but it may not be. So I propose that we send the letter endorsing Marina Coast Water District and also send the principles to the Salinas Valley Basin. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Let's go for 4. Okay, so there's a motion. Yes, sir.
Just a comment. I would like to correct one minor misimpression, which I expected was floating around, and have to say I devoted a lot of time to my slides to make sure that we had maps that would correct this. Marina Coast's notice of intent covers the former Fort Ord. It does not go 1 acre beyond the former Fort Ord. It does include the BLM land and Army lands, and the reason for that is we have good relationships with both the Army and the BLM, but we do not go 1 square foot beyond the former Fort Ord in our overlapping notice of intent. There is more to the Monterey subbasin that goes out into Corral de Tierra. We've never claimed that. That will be under the management as soon as the clock runs out of the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So I just put that out in case that goes in anybody's calculus. Thank you very much.
Okay, comments on the second, Mr. Hoffa.
So, I know Mr. Gunter. He's an honorable man. I think he does a good job of representing his constituents in Salinas. I know Mr. Moore. I think he's an honorable man and does a good job of representing his constituents. I know Mr. Lombardo. He's an attorney. But seriously,
That was a compliment.
but seriously, you know, sometimes folks, we make decisions here in kind of almost a tribal way, and I don't think that's good policy making. I mean, ask yourself really, what is going to be in the best interests of the broader community? And yes, as was said by one of the speakers, we wear 2 hats here. I'm representing Monterey, but I'm also representing the folks who live on the former Fort Ord. We have those dual responsibilities here. And so as I look at it, I ask myself, what is the benefit to people to have 2 layers of bureaucracy? And those of you who are conservatives, you have to ask yourself, do I really believe in adding extra layers of bureaucracy? Is that going to provide a better water supply? I think that it does add risk. It is true that the Salinas Valley has been working with us in very positive ways that I'm very appreciative of. But we don't know what the future holds, and I think it makes sense to have one agency that is both managing the groundwater, determining how much water can be pumped, when water should not be pumped, where it should be pumped from, because that is going to affect the reliability of the water supply for the future development of the Fort Ord, and it's going to affect the potential costs of that water. So to me, and the last thing I want to address is, does it matter? I think it does matter because the state's going to be making this decision, and they're going to want to know, what does the collective political will of this area think? Do we think this agency or that agency should be making these decisions? So I think our action or inaction will make a difference, and I think it makes sense to have one agency that we have a direct relationship with. We get to approve their budget relative to the former Fort Ord. So that's my thought.
Mr. Venter.
Well, Chair, I find it rather interesting as I was being portrayed as the water stealer from Salinas, considering we send 4 million gallons of water that's going to be going over to hold back saltwater intrusion so the wells can be kept solid for the northern part of this county. We're going to send that water over here so that we can start feeding into the peninsula. And then we've just been granted a $10 million grant along with the Water Resource Agency to gather up all of our extra water, all of our stormwater runoff, all that Blanco drain stuff that's going to be cleaned up and put back in so that it'll be usable. And I'm sure that Marina's going to get their fair share of that. But as someone that grew up living at Fort Ord, right over here not far from here as a kid of father in the military for 30 years, and then living in Marina at 3252 Fitzgerald Circle, I have a pretty good concept of what goes on in Marina and with the fine people of, but I look at it this way. So we add this extra groundwater sustainability agency. We add one down in Greenfield, and the state decides they don't like either one of them or they don't like us. And when they take over, the fees that will be assessed on Marina would be nothing compared to what would come in the future. This is our opportunity to band together as one county and one water world as far as just the agency that's going to put together a plan with Marina, with California Water, with Cal-Am Water, with all the farmers and the people in this valley. We have a chance to be number one and to prove that we're better than a lot of people in the Bay Area and other places where they're fighting over little plots of land. And I think the answer is that you don't endorse. And so I will be voting no on the second motion and the third motion when we get to them. And I'll go with the first. Thank you.
Okay, other comments on the second? Dr. Ochoa, thank you for your patience.
So I'm kind of torn on this issue. I guess I would support taking no action, and for that reason, I would make a comment against the current substitute motion. On the one hand, my staff leans toward Marina Coast Water and making that, and supports that statement because they feel that there'll be marginally more assurance of maintaining our water, allocations. But on the other hand, this authority was set up to be stewards of the Fort Ord Reuse Plan, and the whole philosophy of our organization here is to take a regional approach to look at the environment as well as education and the economy. And under the environment, we need to look at sustainability. And the whole rationale of this law, creating GSAs, has been to manage water basins. And it seems to me that, I'm kind of wondering why the state didn't include in its legislation a statutory definition of which, based on the geology of the issue, so that you would have to create authorities that match the physical systems. That's the logical, regional, sustainable approach. And so philosophically, I'm supportive of that, but, the more parochial interest would be do whatever it takes to ensure that CSUMB keeps its water. But I think when we're here, we're custodians of the region, of sustainability, of the environment. So I think that, ideally, why should we have to make a choice? It would have been ideal if the region had been able to get together and actually work collaboratively and collectively to manage this resource in a sustainable fashion. So that's why the most comfortable thing I'm with is either do nothing or make a statement of principles that's consistent with the mission and the charge of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and let the chips fall where they're made.
Other comments on the second? Ms. Corwin.
If I may, my comment is that the members on FORA is representing the community as a whole, so I'll have to say I just have to go with Dr. Ochoa, and that is going to be the reason why I cannot endorse the letter. So my vote is good. I'm going to go with number one.
Okay, so any other comments? Okay, on this particular motion, Marina Coast Water is the purveyor for the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and you will have your water because it's guaranteed by the agreements with the Army and the Monterey County Water Resources Agency. So that water is not going to go away. It's part of the agreement. Whether we vote for this or not, that stays. When you look at the former Fort Ord lands, there are no facilities beyond eucalyptus south and east. There are, except for one pipeline going down General Moore. That's it. So to think that Marina Coast Water is not going to raise any fees or collect any monies, I think is a fallacy. And the issue of representation I get hit with every day in my community in terms of the folks that live in the Highlands and other places in the former Fort Ord. So I'm going to be voting no on this motion here, the third, let's see, what, second substitution? Yeah, second substitution, third motion. So I'm going to go ahead and call for a roll call vote. Yes.
Director Parker? Yes. Director Phillips?
No.
Director Edelin?
No.
Director O'Connell?
Yes.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Hoffa?
Yes.
Director Rubio?
No.
Director Alexander?
No.
Director Carbone?
No.
Director Gunter?
No.
Director Garfield?
No.
And Director Reimers?
No.
Okay, the motion fails. Now, on the question of
My motion.
the first substitute motion.
Yes. Which was to endorse the request from Marina Coast Water District, as well as to authorize the executive officer to transmit a letter endorsing MCWD as the GSA. Only reason I repeat that is because we've had a little gap here.
Do we need to make more comment on the second?
Please, no.
Okay, so roll call vote, please.
Director Parker? Yes. Director Phillips? Director Edelin?
No.
Director O'Connell?
Yes.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Hoffa?
Yes.
Director Rubio?
No.
Director Alexander?
No.
Director Carbone?
No.
Director Gunter?
No.
Director Garfield?
No.
Director Reimers?
No.
Okay, motion fails. Now, on the original motion. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Danny?
The substitute motion is that we send the statement of principles to both Salinas Valley Joint Powers and Marina Coast Water District.
So,
No endorsement, just the statement of principles. In other words, the second option given to us by the staff.
Both organizations, not just one.
Right.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any comment on second?
I haven't seen the cover letter. I have no problem with the statement of principles per it's like motherhood and apple pie. I don't know why we're really doing it because of that, but the cover letter could be construed or misinterpreted based on what's put on the cover letter, and that could be a political document itself that could skew the perception of why we're sending that up there. And we don't have time to really look at the cover letter right now, so I'm going to be voting against it. I just want to keep things clean, and anything we say as an organization could be misconstrued or misinterpreted, or could be seen to be favoring one side or the other. And we've got two honorable groups here, and I want to stay out of the food fight, to tell you the truth.
I tend to agree. I can support just sending the principal, but I'm worried about the cover letter. But if it just says, thank you, here's her, something innocuous, I can live with that.
Sort of on this point of the cover letter, if the proposal is to send the statement of principles to both groundwater sustainability agencies, there's no time limit on that. It's not going to Sacramento, it's going to Marina and Salinas. So is there the opportunity to craft a simple cover letter that the board could see so that there'd be comfort with its cleanliness in terms of the message being sent? Would that be possible? Yeah, at our next meeting.
Certainly.
Does the maker of a motion okay with that? Okay, the seconder? Okay. Any other comments?
I support Supervisor Parker.
Get a picture of that. Any other comments? Okay, roll call vote, please. On the substitute motion by Dr. Ochoa.
Would it be appropriate to just restate the substitute motion and indicate that a very simple letter will be reviewed by the board prior to sending? Could that just be included?
Would you restate the motion, sir?
So the motion would be to forward our statement of principles to both contending agencies with a simple cover letter that basically highlights the fact that, we hope that whichever agency takes on the responsibility is mindful of these principles.
To be ready for the next meeting. Right. Okay. Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Director Phillips?
Yes.
Director Parker? Yes. Director Edelin?
Yes.
Director O'Connell?
Yes.
Director Brown?
Yes.
Director Hoffa?
Yes.
Director Rubio?
Yes.
Director Alexander?
Yes.
Director Carbone?
Yes.
Director Gunter?
Yes.
Director Garfield?
Yes.
Director Reimers?
Yes.
Okay, we have a unanimous vote. Holy moly. Wow. No? Because this one prevailed. Right, right. Okay. I know everybody's in shock, but let's go ahead and move on to the public comment period. Are there any items from the public on items not on the agenda?
I'm Jan Schreiner, resident of Marina. One of the items is not on the agenda. At the last Sigma Advisory Committee meeting, the Salinas General Manager, Gary Peterson, was asking if there are other reasons that the Marina Coast Water District would not be supported with the GSA. And it was very, very interesting to me today to see such a negative statement provided by a California American attorney who is not, California American is not a part of the Sigma.
Yeah, this is an item that this public comment period is for items not on the agenda.
I'm giving you a question about the California American Water and their interest in the Sigma process.
Okay.
Is that on the agenda?
You're referencing discussion that did take place during an agenda item, and that was my problem.
I'm sorry, you have a problem. What I was trying to address was the California American interest in the process and how some things are not clearly stated. And I'm just concerned that some people in the room may be being intimidated by California American Water because they are the water purveyor for their own municipalities.
You're referencing, again, items on the agenda, which is improper.
California American is providing water for municipalities is on the agenda?
I would just ask that you make yourself clear as to what item you're not to be addressing items that are on the agenda, and you're referencing conduct that took place during the course of this meeting. So I'm asking you not to do that.
Okay.
It's improper.
Okay, so is it all right to reference behavior on the part of the public in the meeting? Or we're on the agenda as well, because it's public comment.
If it has nothing to do with that.
And your time is elapsing.
Right, okay, thank you for that. So anyway, I'm very, very concerned about the impact of California American Water on the groundwater sustainability questions. They have no groundwater rights, period. And I think that needs to be really clearly understood. that California American Water has no groundwater rights in the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin. Thank you.
Any other public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Any items from the board? Well, I would like, yes, sir.
Yeah, just one, since I did spend so much time on my slides. They will be available at mcwd.org, I believe, first thing Monday morning. And I believe they're now public record for FORA, so thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll adjourn and I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Blitzer's long-standing service to the community, and thank you so much. And hopefully you won't remain a stranger. Means adjourned.